I, 29 male, am an architect, and up until last week, I thought I was building a solid life with my girlfriend, who I'll call Sarah, 27 female. We've been living together for 2 years in a high-rise apartment in downtown Chicago. The rent is steep, but I cover about 70% of it because I make significantly more, and frankly, I wanted her to be able to save money to pay down her student loans. I paid the security deposit. I bought the leather sectional, the 75-inch OLED TV, the mahogany dining set, the Dyson appliances, and the high-end cookware. She brought a beanbag chair, a cat that hates me, and a mountain of debt. The dynamic was simple. I handled the heavy lifting financially, and we operated as a team. Or so I thought. Tuesday night, the air in the apartment felt heavy. I was sketching on my iPad on the couch, and Sarah was sitting on the armchair, her face illuminated by the blue light of her phone. She'd been distant for weeks, late nights at the office, guarded text messaging, a sudden password change on her phone. I'm not the jealous type, but I'm observant. She finally looked up, her expression eerily calm, almost rehearsed. She told me she had been doing a lot of reading about attachment styles and modern relationship dynamics. She said she felt like we were stagnating and that she felt trapped. I was confused. We just got back from a trip to Cabo that I paid for. We had a great life. But then she dropped the bomb while swiping her thumb across her screen. I recognized the interface immediately, Bumble. She was actively swiping on dating apps while breaking up with me. She said she thought we should see other people and explore our options, but then she offered a tight, patronizing smile and said she didn't think we should give up the apartment. She claimed the market was terrible and that we made great roommates. She proposed we live together, separate our romantic lives, and just exist. Like ethical non-monogamy, but without the commitment part. I stared at her, trying to process the audacity. She wanted to date other men and bring them back to the apartment where I pay the majority of the rent. When I pointed this out, she rolled her eyes and told me not to make it transactional. She said it was about maturity and transitioning into a platonic co-living situation because she couldn't afford to move out, and moving caused her too much stress. She even threw in a jab about me being emotionally unavailable lately, which was rich considering I'd been working overtime to pay for our lifestyle. She told me I could date too, swiped right on some guy, and then stood up to grab her overnight bag. She was going to her sister's for the weekend to give me time to process her brilliant idea. She told me not to wait up because she might grab drinks with friends. As she walked out, I just said, "Interesting idea." She didn't hear the malice in it. She only heard compliance. The moment the door clicked shut, the silence of the apartment didn't feel lonely. It felt like clarity. I didn't drink. I didn't cry. I walked over to the filing cabinet and pulled out our lease agreement. We were both on the lease as joint tenants, which meant we were equally liable for the rent, but it also meant we both had a right to the space. However, the furniture was a different story. I pulled the folder labeled warranties and receipts. Best Buy, Crate and Barrel, West Elm. Every major item in that apartment was paid for by my Visa card. I owned 95% of the items inside those walls. The only things she actually owned were her clothes, her makeup, the beanbag, and some throw pillows. It was Friday night. She would be gone until Sunday. I didn't sleep. I created a spreadsheet. Saturday morning at 7 a.m., I called a guy I knew from college who runs a secondhand luxury furniture consignment shop. I sent him photos and told him I needed it gone today. All of it. Cash. I offered him a 40% discount on market value if the living room was empty by noon. By 1 p.m., the apartment echoed. The living room was barren. No TV, no couch, no rugs, no lamps. Just the hardwood floor and her sad, gray beanbag chair sitting in the corner like a wilted mushroom. I cleared out the kitchen, leaving exactly 1 fork, 1 spoon, 1 plate, and 1 pot, the cheap ones she had brought from her dorm years ago. I even took the router, because I paid the internet bill. Then I went to my bedroom, formerly our bedroom. I installed a heavy-duty keypad lock on the door. I moved my mattress, my clothes, and the few personal items I kept into that room. I set up a mini fridge and a hot plate I bought at Walmart. Then came the piece de resistance. I went to the hardware store, and bought a roll of blue painter's tape. I went to the exact center of the living room and taped a line down the middle. I taped off shelves in the pantry. I taped off the bathroom counter. I sat on the floor of my empty living room, opened my laptop using my phone's hotspot, and typed up a flyer. Roommate wanted. 1 bedroom available in downtown luxury high-rise. Common areas are unfurnished. Split utilities 50/50ths. Must be tolerant of existing tenant who is finding herself. $1,800 per month firm. I taped the sign to the front door of our unit. Sunday evening, the key turned in the lock. Sarah walked in, humming, holding a Starbucks cup. She started to say something about how we could make this work, but then she stopped. The cup fell from her hand, splashing lukewarm latte across the floor. She looked at the empty space where the couch used to be. She looked at the wall where the TV had been mounted, now just showing the screw holes. She spun around, her eyes wide, processing the emptiness. Her gaze landed on the blue tape dividing the room. She asked if we had been robbed. I stepped out of my bedroom, locking the keypad door behind me, and told her no, I just did some redecorating based on her proposal. When she realized I had sold everything, she lost it. Her voice climbed an octave as she screamed about our stuff. I corrected her. She sat on the couch. I bought the couch. There's a difference. She threatened to call the police, claiming I stole everything. I told her to go ahead. She dialed, pacing and screaming into the phone that her boyfriend had cleaned her out. She really believed she was the victim. 20 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. They looked tired. Sarah screamed that I left her with nothing and that it was financial abuse. I handed the officer a binder with a copy of the lease, the receipts for every item removed showing my name and card number, and the receipt from the consignment shop. The officer looked at the receipts, looked at the empty room, and then told Sarah that since her name wasn't on the receipts, it was a civil matter. I had the right to do what I wanted with my property. Sarah was vibrating with rage. The mask of the enlightened, modern woman had slipped, revealing a spoiled child. She hissed that she was going to make my life a living hell until I moved out. She threatened to bring guys over every night and be the loudest, messiest roommate I'd ever seen. I pointed to the roommate wanted sign on the door. She ripped it down, appalled that I would bring a stranger in. I told her I could sublet my half if I wanted to, a bluff, but she never reads contracts, or I could just invite people over constantly, just like she suggested. I reminded her that roommates split rent, and if she didn't pay her half of the $1,800, we'd both get evicted. I have the savings and credit to bounce back. She doesn't. An eviction would ruin her. She slept on her beanbag that night while I slept on my memory foam mattress behind a locked door. But the entitlement runs deep with her. Monday morning, I woke up to the smell of burnt hair. She had purposefully left her hair straightener on the laminate counter in the bathroom, leaving a scorch mark. She smiled sweetly and said accidents happen when you're stressed. She had also turned the thermostat up to 85 degrees. She announced she was having a friend over that night. I went to work and called our landlord, Mr. Henderson. He likes me because I fix things without bothering him. I told him we broke up and I was concerned about the property because she was getting volatile. I sent him photos of the damage to the counter. He told me he didn't want drama, but we were joined on the lease until August. I told him I intended to pay my share and just wanted to document the damage, so I didn't lose my half of the deposit. When I got home, there was a man in the apartment. It wasn't the guy from Bumble. It was a guy in a suit, looking uncomfortable on the beanbag. Sarah introduced him as Mark. I told Mark the place was minimalist, and then reminded Sarah about the utility split, noting I'd be deducting the AC overage from her share since she was running it at 85. Mark looked confused and asked if we split utilities. I cheerfully said we split everything, including the rent which was due in 5 days. Mark left pretty quickly after that. Sarah threw her wine at me, splashing the wall. I told her that was coming out of her deposit too. She tried a new tactic the next day. She stopped cleaning. She left takeout boxes on the floor. She played music at full volume at 3 a.m. I bought noise-canceling headphones and hired a cleaning service for my room only. Then came the real dirty trick. Wednesday, I received a call from HR at my firm. They received an anonymous complaint alleging drug use and distribution from my residence. My blood ran cold. She was trying to get me fired. I immediately offered to take a drug test and explained I had a police report regarding a domestic dispute with my ex who was trying to sabotage me. I tested clean and my boss believed me, but he warned me to keep my personal life contained. When I got home, Sarah was smirking. I told her that filing a false report is a crime, and since she used her phone, which is on the family plan I pay for, I had the call logs. Her smirk vanished. I told her I was cutting her line off in 1 hour. She panicked, saying she needed it for work, but I didn't care. I cut the line. She spent the night screaming at customer service on a borrowed phone. But I knew this war wasn't sustainable. I needed a nuclear option. She was banking on me breaking and moving out so she could keep the apartment. I started digging.
Who was she really seeing?
I checked the shared toll pass account. Her car had gone to Lake Forest, a wealthy suburb, during her girls' trip weekend. I checked her Venmo and found a comment from a friend about a lake house invite. I did some Instagram sleuthing and found the friends' stories. There was Sarah on a boat with her boss, the VP of marketing at her company. A man named David. A married man. A married man whose wife, Jessica, happens to be a high-powered divorce attorney. The pieces fit. She wanted to keep the apartment because she thought David would leave his wife or pay for it. She wanted an open relationship to legitimize her sleeping with him. I found Jessica's contact info and sent her a LinkedIn message. I kept it professional, stating I believed my girlfriend spent the weekend with her husband, David, in Lake Forest, and I had toll records to prove it. I mentioned Sarah was refusing to leave my apartment and suddenly requesting an open relationship. Jessica replied 20 minutes later, "Call me." Her voice was ice cold. She asked for proof. I told her about the toll logs and the photos. She confirmed the boat was hers and that David had told her he was at a conference in Denver. She asked what I wanted. I told her I wanted Sarah out of my apartment, but she was digging in, trying to force me out. Jessica hummed and said she could assist with the employment aspect since David used company funds for these excursions. Then I pitched my idea. I told her I was looking for a subletter or a long-term guest for my half of the apartment. I asked if she knew anyone who needed a place. Jessica laughed, a dark, dry sound. She said she had a client, a young woman who just turned 21, a heavy metal drummer going through a custody battle who needed a place immediately. She had a pet boa constrictor and practiced until 4 a.m. Jessica offered to pay this girl's rent for 6 months up front as a consultation fee. I asked when she could move in. Jessica said, "Tomorrow." Sarah walked in moments later, looking smug with a new phone. She told me David was going to help her and get a lawyer to force me to pay for the stolen furniture. I smiled and told her I had a friend too, named Roxy, who was moving into my room tomorrow. I told her I was moving to the small windowless den and hoped she liked snakes. She looked confused, but I just told her to check her work email in the morning. Thursday morning, I moved my air mattress into the den. At 9 a.m., Roxy arrived. She was clad in leather and spikes, with neon green hair, carrying a snare drum and a large terrarium. She asked where the snake was going. I pointed to the master bedroom and told her to make herself at home. I mentioned Sarah loves quiet and hates reptiles. Roxy grinned and said she was a night owl. I went to work. Around 10:30 a.m., my phone blew up with texts from Sarah. First, "What did you do?" Then, "David just got escorted out of the building by security." And finally, "HR wants to see me. Now." I didn't reply. Jessica texted me, "Checkmate. Fraudulent use of company credit cards for personal travel. Instant termination for cause. I've filed for divorce and frozen the joint assets. He can't help her." When I got home, the apartment was vibrating. Roxy was blasting speed metal and practicing blast beats. Lucifer the snake was in his tank in the hallway. Sarah came home looking like a ghost, carrying a box of personal items. She saw Roxy and the snake and screamed. Roxy introduced herself as the new roomie. Sarah turned to me, trembling, asking why I brought a freak into our house. I corrected her again. My house. I told her Roxy was a paying tenant with rent paid 6 months in advance. Sarah whispered that she lost her job and David wouldn't answer her calls. I told her that was tough, but rent was still due on the 1st. She screamed that she couldn't pay and that David promised to take care of it. I told her David was dealing with his wife, Jessica, the one she helped him cheat on, and the one who paid Roxy's rent. Sarah's face went slack when she realized I had told Jessica. She accused me of ruining her life. I told her she tried to ruin mine first. The next 3 days were a masterclass in misery for her. Roxy was relentless, cooking pungent food, walking around in her underwear, inviting bandmates over for screaming sessions. Sarah stayed in her room. On Saturday, the 1st of the month, I knocked on her door and asked for the $1,800. She opened the door, looking haggard, and begged me to let her stay. I told her no, roommates pay rent. I handed her a 3-day notice to pay or quit that I had downloaded. I told her if she didn't pay, I'd file for eviction, and with an eviction on her record, she'd never rent in this city again. She sobbed and asked where she was supposed to go. I suggested she try Bumble. She packed her bags that night. Her parents in Ohio agreed to buy her a bus ticket home, but wouldn't send money for the apartment. She dragged her suitcases out past Roxy, who was feeding a frozen mouse to Lucifer. Sarah looked at me one last time and said, "I loved you, you know." I told her no. She loved the lifestyle I provided, and the moment she thought she could trade up, she did. She left, leaving the beanbag behind. I locked the door and peeled up the blue tape. Roxy asked if she should stop drumming. I told her to keep going. It sounded like victory. Because Sarah left voluntarily before the 3 days were up, I didn't have to file the formal eviction. I kept her security deposit to cover the rent she owed for that month since she abandoned the lease, without paying. Mr. Henderson was cool about it once he knew I was covering the rent, thanks to Jessica's consultation fee for Roxy. Roxy stayed the full 6 months, and was actually a solid roommate once I got used to the snake. Sarah is back in Ohio working retail. She's blacklisted from marketing in Chicago because word travels fast about embezzlement. David lost everything to Jessica, who was a shark in court. I eventually bought new, better furniture. I didn't rush it. I enjoyed the empty space. It reminded me that I didn't need clutter or a partner who viewed me as a utility bill with a pulse. I ran into Sarah's sister recently. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying I traumatized Sarah and gave her trust issues. I told her I didn't pull the rug out from under her. I just sold it because I bought it. Be careful what you wish for, especially when you're wishing it on a guy who keeps his receipts. And to the guys out there, if she says she wants to be roommates but still live together, make sure you know who owns the couch. Subscribe for more tips on interior design and legal revenge.